not okay, I'll just have a recording that I'll delete.
Okay.
And if you don't feel comfortable saying yes or no publicly, just chat me up in the chat and say, don't share, and then I won't. Okay. We are live, and people are encouraged always, but in particular with mystical literature, to interrupt, to ask, to speak, to disagree. That's a tenet of this, is that we've got to be free to really explore the material. It's a classic tenet. There were a lot of restrictions placed on teaching the Jewish mystical tradition over the millennia, specifically because of the fear of misinterpretation. We're not so dogmatic here as to really be afraid of misinterpretation, but still want to leave it a live possibility that people will be able to ask the questions and understand properly. First, an introduction that will leave you confused, possibly, but will be a necessary grounding to get us all on the same page. Okay, so I've shared on my screen one classic chart of the Sefirot. I'm gonna mute. How do I mute everyone? I'll mute you all and I'll let you speak if you choose. How do I mute all? Does anyone know?
It may be under
participants.
Participants.
Oh, mute all. Okay. And I'm allowing you to unmute yourselves. Also, pro tip, if you just press the space bar when you talk, it will unmute you. Okay. So you see here the chart of Sefirot. And what this is important because the Zohar is working as a sort of form of mystical literature or poetry that's really beautiful and evocative to describe the emanation of God. What that means is God coming into being, but not just God like God up there. That takes us away from what we're doing, but reality. In other words, to describe the process of things becoming as a process of emanation. Things emerge, I like the word emerge, out of godliness. And this describes the process of how God emerges as God's self, so that inner process. But the ultimate manifestation of God's own emergence is the emergence of our world, the world we live in. So the first question is, why should we study this? Why would this be important? And the answer to that question, not just in my opinion, but I think objectively, in the way the Zohar is understanding things, is because God's emergence is mirrored by our own emergence into being. This is the story of how we come to be present in our world. So it's a deep Jewish take about how we operate, our psychology, our talents, our ability to love, our ability to, and our flaws, our ability to screw it all up. And not just in a scientific way, but in the sort of spiritual way that it's about our relationship to every other created thing. And so it's something deep and shared. It's what animates you, it's what animates me, it's what animates the rug, it's what animates the virus. All of it is sort of one universe of spirit. And so in studying and discussing these things, we'll come to give color and character to this chart of divine emanation, which is really also a story of our own emanation. We can look at it that way. And our meeting of God, or meaning. And so this is, what we're doing here is really asking, answering, and sometimes asking again, some of the most difficult questions in order to gain a clearer understanding or appreciation for what it means to live, so that we might live differently. So actually, this could be the most irrelevant study you'd ever do. You could study it in that way, and we would just be academics interested in, with no offense meant to actual academics on the call, but I know we could be academics of the Kabbalah seeking to understand this, and then we would just kind of be like trying to understand something. But we're doing something else, which is trying to really tap into what it means to live, to love, to create, to live lives of meaning, to feel whole, to heal, to deal with pain and suffering. These are some of the subjects of the Zohar. Just to run through the terms, Keter is crown. That's the first emanation of God. What does that mean? Before this, there's something called Ein Sof, God the infinite. We know nothing of God. God is beyond human understanding and description. What can we say about God? Ultimately, we're finite humans, and our lens on things is limited. Even our perception of reality, I'll note, is pretty colored by our eyes. If we were a bug with 12 eyes, our sense of vision would be an entirely different one. Things are made of empty space, but still the table feels solid to us. All of these things are in some way an illusion. They're just our human perspective. The world isn't as we see it. That's our perspective on the world. And so ultimately, we're not capable of understanding the most basic aspect of God. We can say nothing. So that would be called Ein Sof, the infinite or indescribable. And that is sort of beyond what we're talking about. But the mystical tradition teaches that God chose to enter into a relationship with people. And in choosing to enter into a relationship, just like anyone here who's ever been in any kind of relationship, you choose to act in a certain way and you become known by certain characteristics, like bald or funny or honest or angry. Right? And sometimes the self-definition of those things determines who you are. You could be another way. There are people that they move to a new city or a new place and they take on a new persona a bit. And they can be trapped by so the mystical tradition is that God chose to manifest in a specific set of ways to us, not because God is that way, but because that's the way God chose to be perceived by us. That's God's face in this relationship with us people. And so this is relational from the start. I'm going to stop my thing. Are there any questions, what I've said so far? God is a relationship. Okay, sounds like the name of a self-help book. God is a relationship. So the next piece of the mysticism is that the very first thing we can say about God's emanation to being is Keter, the crown. The top of a head is a crown if you fancy yourself a monarch. And the crown here means, in traditional Kabbalah, God's desire or ratzon to do good. God wants ultimately for good things to happen. That is the very first basic principle. This is an optimist's Kabbalah. That's the notion of Keter. But good is complicated. Is good people struggling and learning lessons on their own, having free choice and self-actualization? Is good just giving people candy? What's good? Good is not just giving people candy. It's more complicated than that. And so everything that emerges within that context. The first piece here, chokhmah, wisdom, is an idea. This is God's brain, as it were. And this is what's next. What's next is an aha moment, a burst of creativity. We then move to binah. And I'm going to fly through this. This will all become much clearer when we get to the text in a minute. So don't worry if what I'm saying sounds it doesn't make any sense. I just need you to have heard the terms and have heard something about them so that when we start discussing them in more concrete detail, you're not like, what the hell is he talking about? Does that follow? Good. Okay. So Binah, the next stage of emanation, is a deeper understanding of an idea. So if Chokhmah is the burst of creativity, the aha moment, you have the idea, you've got the solution, but you can't even yet say what it is. It's like a dream, it's evasive. Binah is capturing the idea and being able to work with it, to analyze it. Da'at, Binah is more than that, and we'll discuss. It's also feminine. It's a maternal aspect to it. It's got a caring side and a healing side and an amazed side. It's fascinated by things. Binah is curious. Binah is supportive. It has a personality. Da'at, integrated awareness, lies at the intersection of these things. And it's the fact that when you know something really well, you don't have to think about it to work with it. If you ride a bike, you don't have to think about how to ride a bike. You just ride the bike. Maybe when you're learning, you have to think about it. If you're teaching someone, you have to think a little more. But once you know how to ride a bike, you just enjoy your bike ride. And maybe you only think about it when your bike breaks. So Da'at is integrated awareness of a particular thing. The next thing that emerges are these triads of kind of like point and counterpoint. So we have on the one hand, kindness. If God, at this point, God's manifestation of thinking to do good is to be kind, chesed. But on the other side, gevurah, strength. After all, we know that if you're just kind to people without any rebuke, tough love, accountability, it doesn't work. I'll quote our governor here in Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo, for this point. Regularly in her briefings, she has become known for the catchphrase, just to see if anyone's awake. What catchphrase has Gina Raimondo, the great governor of Rhode Island, become known for? Anyone? You have to unmute yourself. Say again.
Knock it off.
Knock it off. Knock it off. In fact, there is a beer now, right? Am I understanding that correctly? A proclamation ale. Knock it off with Gina Raimondo's picture on it. Do people know that? Knock it off beer with a picture of Gina Raimondo. It's all the proceeds are going to the coronavirus effort for this from the sale of this beer. And I'm told millions have already been raised. Knock it off. So when Gina Raimondo says knock it off, she is being tough, gevura, yes? But she is doing that out of kindness. She is seeking to save us all from killing each other. You follow? So it is mean, but it's meanness in the service of kindness. So that is the Jewish, this isn't love and only. In this tradition of mystical emanation or emergence, kindness immediately must be balanced with toughness to be fully actualized in tiferet, balance or beauty. The ability to actually get this right is really tough. And the Kabbalists saw in the ability to rebuke someone, the rebuke was an important part of Gevura, or to be tough with oneself, but not so tough as to become depressed, demoralized, right? Like, so say you're tough with yourself. I'm tough on myself. Frequently, I'm tough enough on myself that I become demotivated to do anything. I suck at this. And then it's not constructive, it's destructive. So, and often the same if we're tough with others, that's not taken in a loving way. You see this often in family relationships where criticism coming from a place of kindness is taken as control or ego or not knowing or not loving. And actually it becomes fight instead of beauty. So the Kabbalists understood that if you actually get it right, where you can be tough enough but sweet enough to be both improving in your ability to be, but not like breaking it down, not too tough, not too kind, that's actually a beautiful balance. They called it beauty, which is very hard to achieve. From there, we move to Netzach and Hod. Netzach means victory or eternity. And this is the notion that Netzach, victory, also means like long, that we have to keep fighting, that we fall immediately as soon as we're in balance. If I were on one foot here I am on one foot, you can't even see my foot, we fall out of balance, right? So as soon as we get things right, there's a desire to be like proud, like, look at me, I've got it, life is fine. But life has this way, and now we all know, of knocking us all out of balance quickly. And so immediately we fall to this imbalance. And so Netzach is fixing, really, victory, but victory means like you're fighting a war. You're constantly in a struggle. This would be like jihad in an Islamic context, maybe. I don't know if I ever quoted that idea in a mystical Jewish class before, but I'll do it now. The notion of struggle is Netzach, of like a spiritual battle, is Netzach. And it looks long. It is associated with tikkun olam in the Kabbalah, fixing the world or repairing the world. Right? It says that there's these problems and we need to fix them, be they inequality or racism, be they not, I don't know, deep imperfections in our economic system, whatever it might be. Now, the desire to fix can also fall out of balance and can become anger, as it often does, can become cynicism. There are all kinds of negative manifestations of this. So it is balanced by Hod, which means gratitude or appreciation, splendor. So this is like doing and being. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, I always say, is a book written about Netzach and Hod. This is doing and fixing, and this is being and appreciating. The opposite of fixing things is saying, look, the coronavirus is there now, but the sunset is beautiful. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day here in Rhode Island. Neighbors are caring for each other. of appreciating in a positive way what's going on now, now, important, in this Kabbalistic system, Netzach comes from kindness. Fixing things is motivated ultimately by kindness, a desire to see things be better. And actually appreciation is rooted in strength. The strength of being able to resist the temptation to notice what's wrong, which is the overwhelming motivation we have, and negativity bias to see the problems, and to be able to appreciate. So in this practice, gratitude or thanksgiving actually requires a lot of fortitude and strength. All of this, and I'm ending my repeat introductory lecture, I think, which is different every time, ultimately comes to this place of Yesod. It's all gathered together. Yesod is really a holding place. In the Kabbalah, it's the phallus. It's a phallic symbol. It represents the penis. They make it sexual because we're talking about being or creation. And it's gathering all of the energy of whatever is going to be in our world. And Malchut is like the womb. It's sometimes called the divine presence or Shekhinah. It's God manifest in our lives or our bodies. It's yoga practice. It's embodied spirituality. And this is an act of procreation, Yesod and Malchut, to create whatever is going to be. A few notes. This whole thing is considered like masculine, this top half, and this is considered feminine. So sometimes this is where Kabbalists talk about God as a divine mother or a compassionate father. But also Bina and Malchut are both like feminine personalities of God in the Kabbalah. This is sometimes considered the mother and the daughter. Okay. I'm going to end that essay, that piece now. And anyone have any questions? That was a lot. It was a little amorphous, but I'm throwing it at you. And then we'll move to the text.
I have a question. Why the letters on the connections? What do the letters do?
Yeah, that's good. So in the, we probably won't get into that fully, although actually we're going to have the teaching of the letters soon, so we will. In the Kabbalistic system, some of the letters in their shape represent channels of, so letters communicate. That's what letters do. They help us speak and communicate. And in addition to the 10 sfirot, there's a system of 22 letters that are integrated into, that help the sfirot communicate. So letters become not just the channel of our communication, but letters become the way in which the world comes to be. The book that, Kabbalistic book that really is focused on that is Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, and it's all about the relationship between the 10 sfirot and the 22 letters and vowels. So the letters are sort of how the sfirot communicate to each other. It's a basic answer.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I've seen the Kabbalistic tree here put in the context of understanding the chakras. And so the chakra system is from Hinduism also has a depiction of like the different energies that kind of inform the body mind, and they seem to line up pretty well in terms of their different functions. My first question is do you have any notions of that correspondence?
So there's a book called The Jew and the Lotus, where a bunch of rabbis, has anyone read that book on this call? Anyone read that book? No?
I believe I actually read it once before, but it was a while ago.
In that book, actually the Dalai Lama, coming from a Buddhist place, but well aware of his antecedents in the Hindu tradition, deals with the relationship between the Tree of Life, this Kabbalistic system, and the Hindu system at some length. And there's speculative discussion about whether they may have influenced each other. Academics, I'm not an expert on this, but academics suggest that actually they may have had contact with each other via Sufi mystics at some point. And the Sufis were the ones who had contact both in the Hindu world and the Jewish world with mystical traditions. And it seems that there are particular places and times where there are likely conduits of potential influence between the two ideas. But but I don't know a lot about that. I just know that professors have written essays about it. But I could try and find more.
Well, could I ask one more question?
Of course.
Okay, sure. So then, so I'm kind of like, this is what I guess confirmation about what I'm seeing. That basically it seems like the Kabbalistic tree or the tree of life kind of has three primary layers of description about kind of like the nature of change in the world. And like one is the manifestation of God in the world. The other one is manifestation of humans and their action in the world. And then the third one is in the way that we were just talking about in terms of how it corresponds to like the primary energies that inform our psychology, and like like the chakra system.
I think that's a fair, a lot of times internally, the way it's spoken about are awakening from above or below. And so the interesting questions are, is the energy of movement from us, like in this realm, this being like the world we live in, and how does that interact with what's going on high, versus is the awakening from on high, sort of interjecting into our world. So a lot of the discussion is about sort of the back and forth of energy transfer, but then there are sort of three levels spoken about in this system, but they're often this level of Keter Chochmah Bina, the mind of God, Tiferet, this sort of level, and then Malchut, this level, are sort of often the three levels that are broken out very specifically. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just learning more about how you would kind of categorize these different concepts. Great, thank you.
Yeah, there's more to say about that. I'll just flag that by saying Isaac Luria, the Ari, the great Kabbalist, developed many combinations of energy movement with different things taking primacy. And he called those Partsufim, or faces of God. And those Partsufim in Lurianic Kabbalah, there's a fair number of them, maybe 12. And they become sort of 12 pathways to think about this. I could say more about that maybe offline.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to jump us to the text, if that's okay. Everyone see the text now? I have the English text up. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I'm just opening.
Is it, and we're holding on 1B, is that what that is? 1B?
Yeah, we're actually a little further in. So last time we discussed this teaching. And what was the teaching? I'm just going to say what it was. I'm going to describe it outside, meaning not inside, and then just to move on, but you'll need to know the basic of the first part of the teaching. And that was, there is a verse, I call this who's on first. So for anyone who's lost in the esoteric, let's take it really down for a moment. Yes. So there's a verse in Isaiah that says, lift your eyes high, and see who created these things. So the verse in Isaiah is talking about this notion, you can almost picture like Abraham, right, looking up at the stars and asking the basic spiritual question, who made these things? Oh, is there a chat? Am I missing a participant? Would you please full screen the text? Have I full screened the text? Is the text, can people see the text? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So the verse says, look and see who created these. So the basic level, we think we're talking about God created the physical world. But the Zohar emphasizes me, the question, and it says actually, and maybe folks who are here will agree or disagree with the summary, but I think the basic teaching is who created these things? No. The answer to who created these things isn't an answer. In other words, this version of mysticism is the opposite of the classic religion you're used to, which says God created these things, and says that asking the question or opening the eyes and saying who made these things, just being in the place of being amazed, where you look at the natural world and you say, wow, just radical amazement was the term Heschel used, that place is one where one enters into relationship with God. It's actually the opposite of knowing about God. It's wondering how creation could be possible that one comes to know God. And actually, as soon as one has certainty about that, we actually lose the thing, which is you lose the amazement and the curiosity and the wonder. So the awe or the wonder is actually a higher sort of spiritual level than theological certainty. And so the answer to who created these things becomes who created these things? God as manifest by the question who, or God as ununderstandable, God who you can only ask about. The God you can ask about but never know about is the God that created these things. And tapping into the question is the place we'd want to be. In the rung of Sfirot that we were discussing before, that was the place of Bina, the place where God begins to take the form of the idea of being and understand it is the first thing we can understand about God. We can never fully understand God's calculations. I like to think sometimes about just the forces, the scientific forces of the world, of gravity, the strong force, the weak force, these things, right? And the miracle of all of that, and sort of say God's ability to fashion this sort of universe or other universes or the multiverse or whatever, we'll never comprehend the vastness of that, but being amazed by it, so we can be amazed by the order and sort of recognize the order. So Bina, from God's perspective, is the beginning of an ordering of things, and from our perspective is a sense of order that we can ask about and explore, knowing that the more we know, we'll just have new questions. You know what I'm saying? And I think science is actually a good way to think about that, right? Because that's the scientific inquiry as well. Like the more we understand, the more we can refine and formulate what it is we don't understand in a certain sense. Maybe philosophers of science would disagree with that formulation. I don't know, but it feels like something I can say as a rabbi. So great. So we were dealing last time with the teaching me, who created these things. And so now this is where we are.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I think maybe you've left me behind a little bit. It sounds like when you say who created the world, it's sort of like X equals the creator of the world. And what does that tell us about X or who, other than that it created the world?
So that's the point. It doesn't. That's it. So you're hitting the point. The point is to be asking the question who. It's not about the creator. It's about the question, the quest. So the Zohar here is turning the verse around and saying, real relationship with God isn't theology. It's radical amazement. It's being curious, like a child, wondering how things work, being interested in them. It actually tells you nothing. So the conclusion of this teaching, which is where we're at, we said, who is the end of heaven above? It's sort of the limit, the upper limit of what we can understand about God. And the more we understand, when we work all the way down to Shekhinah, the lowest Sphira, that's called what? That's a different question. What? What is a little more concrete than who? But that brings us to what? Jacob inherited this, I'm reading now, running from end to end, from first end to last end. What? For he stands in the middle. So who created these? So that passage, which concludes this teaching and brings us to where we were, basically, I don't know if I've answered your question, Michael, but the basic point here is not to understand really about, or that we understand about God through our letting go a little bit of our ego and our need to know.
Would you say that, you mind if I just offer something? Because it's funny that I actually came on this path of wonder, I call it, just from my own inquiry and my own spirituality. And for me, it was very much the same thing you're describing. I had no idea that it had to be true. So that basically it was this intuitive realization that came not from knowing something cognitively, but from having a letting go into wonder and understanding this feeling that everything is beyond explanation.
Excuse me, I can't hear Dan's questions or comments.
Yeah, Dan, it was a little blurry. Can you try that again?
Really? Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
So I just wanted to say that in my past, in my spiritual life, I came across this path, what I call the path of wonder. And for me, I had no idea that it had roots in Jewish mysticism. But for me, it was very much an intuitive realization of the spiritual dimension or God's presence in existence. By realizing the fact that there is no explanation for existence, that there is no explanation for God, there's no explanation for reality, that this is wonder. And that wonder itself allowed for and offered an intuition that was beyond thinking about things conceptually.
Yeah. I'll add that I think it's important here. This teaching followed up a teaching about children in the Zohar being the people that redeem the world. You know, people always say, politicians always say the children are the future, make it very concrete. And the Zohar said the children redeem the world from sin. But actually, the main feature of children is a basic boundless curiosity or desire to learn about things. And there is something sort of ingrained about the human condition of wanting to know and understand that is fairly deep. And I think that's also what the Zohar is saying, is that in order to tap into what's deep about that place we can tap into in ourselves, of sort of the inner child in all of us that wants to just understand stuff and know about it, is actually a deep spiritual place where we can not fully meet, but begin to meet in not in quantity, but in quality, this attribute of emanation. That there's a deep wonder to the universe. It's a mysterious universe. And the more we can capture the mystery. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So now, here we are. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew and the English, just because, and the Aramaic, because it's beautiful. And I apologize. I know for some people a little review, for other people probably a little too short to be fully comprehensible. But hopefully now, from now on, we'll all be on the same plane. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Alazar bani, psok milach, yiskale stima de raza ilah divnei alma la yadin. So Rabbi Shimon said, this is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's the reputed author of the Zohar, a mystic whose death or yortzeit is on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer coming up, who's supposed to be the author, although academics think that's not true, of this work. But he's certainly the one positioned in that way. He says, Elazar, my son, his son is teaching, cease your words, stop teaching, so that the concealed mystery on high, unknown to any human, may be revealed. So interesting, there's a pun in the Hebrew. It says, psok milech, stop your words. And this is one of these things. Psok, stop, can mean both stop, or it can mean pasuk, speak. And so he's actually, I think it's intentional ambiguity, and I know that the note in the Daniel Matt Zohar says the same thing, or suggests that possibility, that it's saying both speak, keep teaching, but also shut up, stop speaking. And what's fun here is that Rabbi Shimon is playing with the teaching. In other words, if the teaching is about mystery and not knowing and letting go of the ego and the self and giving into wonder, and wonder actually leads us to be connected. It's not just wonder. Wonder connects us to other things, right? Because we let go of ourselves and are able to embrace, like, we move beyond our houses and see the big universe in the pasuk. So actually, the more you teach about it, the more you can easily get caught up in your own teaching about wonder. And you can, like, even the notion of studying wonder or curiosity can kill it. And so stop. If you want to live this teaching, in order to speak this teaching, you have to stop this teaching. So this is somewhat equivalent, I think, this episode to like the Taoist teaching for the of like those that know about it can't teach about it or whatever. People ever heard that? But Taoism? Anyone? No one? And trying to speak? You look like you're...
Sorry, I didn't hear Dan, but maybe you were saying, I think the famous line is the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. So, you know, the effort to speak it is self-nullifying or something.
Yeah, so this is the Jewish version of that. Rabbi Shimon says, if you want to give a teaching about not teaching and just giving into sort of basic wonder, then maybe you should shut up. But that isn't just their interaction, right? That highlights the mystical quandary, which is ultimately, how do you teach about non-sophistication?
What can I ask? What if we did read it the other way? How would read it? So if it was pasok milach, like, you know, drash, or, you know, like explain your words. If that's how we translate pasok milach, instead of like mafsik, how would that change what we're looking at?
Yeah. So. So here's the thing. He is quiet afterwards. So I think we have to translate it at the most basic level is be quiet. But I think the sort of secondary element to it is, and by being quiet, there is a teaching. And actually this teaching is the teaching of being quiet, which is so powerful these days. There's a lot of internet noise and radio signal noise going on in our brains, on our computers, whatever. And this is kind of saying, actually, you need quiet. You need quiet. And only in that quiet can the mystery be revealed. So actually, by being quiet, you're going to speak. It's not like an either or. It's the being quiet is going to speak. So then Rabbi Elazar, what does he do after this? He is quiet. Shasik Rabbi Elazar. Bacha Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon cried, he wept. Vikam Riga Vada, Vikam Riga Vizada. So he wept, and then he paused. Then he said the following thing: Amar Rabbi Shimon, Elazar, my Elah. We discussed so far me, who. This notion that actually, when you ask who created these things, you resist the urge to answer, that me, the question, the radical amazement in the language of Heschel, I think, is the thing itself. And then, but the next, who created these things, the verse in Isaiah said. Look at the sky and see who created these. So what are these? So we have this interesting, almost Talmudic back and forth. Itema kochava mazale. If you say that they are the stars and constellations, they're always visible there. In other words, you want to think that the question, who created these things, is about new creations. You know, why would you say who made this thing that's always been there? Like, you wouldn't stop to ask about, we don't stop to have radical amazement about things we take for granted. If something is new, that's when you ask about its origin. And so you could have given the answer, the answer of the morning prayers, that God renews everything at every moment, that anything when we stop to look at it is new. But he gives a different answer. These things that you're supposed to look up and ponder aren't stars and constellations because they were always there. And also, there's an interesting thing. The stars and constellations weren't created by this aspect of the Godhead. So there's both a logical problem with the verse and also a Kabbalistic problem. Uvama ispirihu. They were created not by the question who, a deep question of understanding, but by ma. So I'm going to switch my screen share for a moment to help understand what that is saying. It's saying that the physical things in the world are not created here with the question who, but they're tangible things. They're created by the question what. That's here. In other words, you're putting the cart before the horse, the cart before the horse. We're asking a more basic question about the emergence of things. Not like the question what is the sun? What is the star? What is the moon? And the answers to those questions are scientific. The moon is a rock. Maybe a meteor struck the earth, or another planet they think now maybe collided with the earth years ago, and they combined and some rock fell off and floats around. And that's like a very specific answer to what are the stars and constellations, like balls of gas and the Andromeda galaxy, like specific things. And that's all in what? And that is a spiritual discipline of looking in our world, but that's this discipline, the earthly discipline, the lowest rung of the ladder, kind of. This is what they call the bottom of heaven, and this is the top of heaven. So we want to know here in Bina, we have a different question we're asking. Okay, I'm going to go back. Okay. And then they give a proof. Bidvar Hashem Shemayim Na'asu, that the heavens, the physical heavens, were made by the word of God. And the word of God is another term in the Kabbalah for Shekhinah, for Malchut, for the lowest Sphira. So, as for things concealed, such would not be referred to as these, for that word indicates something revealed. So we have another problem. Okay, it's not the obvious things. But there's another problem. If it's things that are like totally hidden that no one can know about that God created, if it's just secret mysteries, they wouldn't be called these. These implies tangibility, something you can hold. These things. These. I have these books in my hands. These are things that you can talk about. So if we're not talking about tangible objects, but we're also not talking about intangible objects. It says who created these things? So what are these things that we're talking about? They can't be obvious, because why would we ask about things that are obvious? But they can't be hidden, because we wouldn't call those things these. So we're stuck. We don't know what we're talking about anymore. We have no idea what we're talking about. We're confused. Ela raza da lois galia bar yoma hada chad chazina al kef yama va'as Eliyahu. One day, so this mystery was only revealed to me one day when I was at the seashore. Elijah came and asked me, I'll read it just in the English here, and folks who have the Hebrew can follow along if that's okay. Rabbi, do you know the meaning of who created these? So Elijah the prophet. In the Jewish mystical tradition, there's something called a Giloi Eliyahu. Whenever a teaching is going to come down from on high, it's Elijah the prophet who reveals it. And I think people know Elijah from the Passover Seder. Yes, anyone meet him this year? If people are familiar with this notion that Elijah occasionally visits and is sort of a messenger of God for mystical messages. There's more to say, but he often is the vehicle for mysteries. He came and asked, Rabbi, do you know the meaning of who created these? So he asked the question. I answered, these are the heavens and their array, the work of the Blessed Holy One. Human beings should contemplate them and bless him. The simple answer, these things are the heavens, the stars. People should contemplate, gosh, why am I here? And thank God for the fact that they are. It's that simple. That's what I told him. And then he quoted verses, as it is written, when I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you are setting, Lord, God our Lord, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. this pasuk, by the way, oh, someone is in the waiting room, Justin. I don't know who that is, but I'll let him in. Someone just come in. Justin has just come in. I don't know who Justin is, but Justin, welcome.
Thank you.
So here we have Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz. People may know this because it made its way into the Kedusha for the high holidays, into the holidays liturgy. Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz. So the point there is Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz. What? Okay, let me just move on. So that was what he said. So Elijah corrects him. Elijah said to me, Rabbi, the word was concealed with the Blessed Holy One, and he revealed it in the Academy on high. Here it is. So here's the teaching. Here's what these are. This is what God created. But God, the God we wonder about, not the God we know. When concealed of all concealed, that's a description of Bina, of the, just to get you back. The Zohar isn't working with these concepts, it is describing them. And so it refers here to Bina as something that is steamen dechol steamen, is closed of all closed, locked of all locked, concealed of all concealed. That's how it's choosing to describe it. Okay. When concealed of all concealed verged on being revealed, when God was emanating, as it were, it produced at first a single point, which ascended to become thought. So the first thing that happened was chokhmah, wisdom. Within it, inside of it, drew all drawings, graved all engravings, carving within the concealed. Editor says it refers to Ein Sof or Keter. Yes. Okay. So, okay, we have an issue going on. Concealed of all concealed. So, Stephen Dechal Stephen. In the past, in our teaching, this has been referring to Bina, that part of God we don't understand. Here, it does sound like, so I'm going to take the editor's note as correct. It's talking about Ein Sof, the part of God that isn't just concealed, but is entirely concealed from all human understanding. So it wouldn't be Bina, it would be Ein Sof, verged on being revealed. In other words, when God wanted to be known, produced at first a single point, which ascended to become thought. Within this idea or thought, drew all drawings, graved all engravings, carving within the concealed holy lamp, that's Chokhmah, a graving of one hidden design, Holy of Holies, a deep structure emerging from thought called me, who, the origin of structure, existent and non-existent, deep and hidden, called by no name but who. So this is the Zohar's beautiful description of what I tried to say in the introduction, how God's desire to create or be moved from thought or an idea to a structure. And so here, Bina, understanding, becomes the place or the house where all structure of the universe of being will be hashed out. It's sort of like the, this is a cold example, but the nonprofit board of existence. I think Bina that would be a fair description, but it's a place of healing. It's a place where problems are fixed. It's also called here the Holy of Holies. So it has a mapping in the temple in Jerusalem, which is both a physical place, but it is also a gateway to that which is beyond it, right? The tradition is that the ark, the dimensions of the ark of the covenant didn't actually fit in the Holy of Holies, and yet still it managed to. So it's this place that exists and doesn't exist. It's the very bare bones structure of existence. And you can only describe it by asking about it. So it is describable or knowable, but only in its mystery or its non-understandability. So it's the very first thing we can know about God is what we can't know. Does that make sense, sort of? If not, questions, comments? Seeking to be revealed, to be named, it garbed itself in a splendid, radiant garment and created Elah, these. Elah attained the name. These letters joined with those culminating in the name Elohim. Now a word play occurs. If you take the Hebrew letters me or who, and you combine them with Elah, these, me bara Elah, who created these, well, if you combine me, who, and these, Elah, you get Elohim. Do you see Elah and me? So if you combine these letters, the Zohar is teaching, you actually get God. God is a combination of mystery and manifestation. It's manifestation that is ultimately non-understandable. And so it's not just a teaching in the Sefirot, it's how this name emerges. Until it created Elah, it did not attain the name Elohim. There was no God until God became more manifest. Not in time, but in primacy. Based on this mystery, those who sinned with the golden calf said, Elah, these are your gods, O Israel. So people may know the episode of the golden calf. Moses and Aaron construct a calf for the people to worship when Moses is gone. Let me just plug in. I'm sorry. I think my battery is running low and I don't want to become mysteriously absent. 1 second. You're still with me? Okay, so the golden calf. There, what happens? This very question is a live question, because just understanding the basic thing, Moses is on the mountain, communing with God, knowing him, and the people feel that they have no answer to the question, me, who will lead us? How will we connect? They don't know. And so their anxiety about their lack of ability to understand God manifests negatively. And so because they can't understand, they can't sit with this question, like sitting with the question, me, bothers them so much, they create fake gods. They create a golden calf. And then they actually say, Elah Elohecha Yisrael. These are your gods, Israel, is what they say about the calf. But the teaching here is Elah, they make God only something that is understandable to people. They take them creating their own God in their own likeness, which is, of course, the danger of mysticism, is that in these contemplations, we'll create gods after what we desire, as opposed to gods that call for humility. This is, of course, this is a critique of all religion. So when the Zohar is saying this, I like to think it's not just critiquing those people, but it's warning about a trend within Judaism, particularly within medieval philosophical Judaism, possibly, based on its time. But I would say that there could be modern analogs if I wanted to get on my high horse now, and say that it's afraid of us creating gods that are of gold and silver. So in that case, gods of status and power that reinforce the power structures that exist, gods of wealth, gods of our own creation or image with nothing we don't understand, of using religion to justify that which we already know, as opposed to pushing us to move beyond what we already know to a place of awe or wonder. So the opposite, it's like security. They're looking for security, when the Zohar feels that what does it mean that God is Bina? What it means is that our God should make us both secure in the things we understand, but also we should be able to sit with some insecurity. That's part of the theological lesson I think is implicit here. I don't know that it's explicit. I think this is my take on it, but that there's a me component, a who component, that we should always be wondering about God, and also wondering if we're worshiping the right God, and what that means about our priorities. I think that's a deep question now. But that's this teaching also, is you need me and Ayla. There's a mix of both comfort and what we know and what we don't know. Okay. And that was this. So this is interesting. The Zohar has like a theory. That was the mistake of the golden calf, that in their sort of quest for me, they created Ayla, and they thought they knew too much. Comments about that? I think that's a really interesting.
I find this to be a very deep and beautiful metaphysics going on here, amongst other things, no doubt. But so the starting point of the question was, what does it mean? What are these? And we're first told it's not the heavens and the stars, because that's always there. But as we get deeper into it, it seems like it's reminding us it's not merely that God created the heavens, but that God created the possibility of anything, because these indicate differentiation, right? When you use the word these, you're separating something from some other thing. I'm looking at these, but not those, right? So more deeply, it's not just that God created the heavens, it's that God created the possibility of anything, of any form of differentiation, which is a sort of much deeper question. And then we're reminded that God is himself distinct from the differentiations that he created, and God is unknowable. And that gives the danger of the golden calf, because because we can't access God, we're tempted to take the thing we can access, the concrete physical world, and worship them instead. But then we're reminded at the same time that the very possibility of differentiation, is connected deeply to God. So the concrete physical things that we access really are our avenue to get to the thing that we ultimately can access. So we distinguish them, but then we use them as a path to get back together. So that's some of the metaphysics I'm seeing in this passage.
Yeah,
here.
I think you've said it better than I could, actually. So thank you.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? Hello?
Hello.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to add something, that I think one of the things that's coming through in this is that there's a difference between understanding God from a conceptual place, and having ideas about what he is and what he's not, and having a more kind of intuitive understanding, which doesn't necessarily come from thought. And I think that I feel like maybe I wonder if some people are just like grabbing at straws and they think about, well, I can't know what he is, so I should be in wonder. But I think that, like, at least in my experience, there's a certain kind of intuition that arises from that wonder that does speak to your heart, that helps you to understand some aspect of the nature of God, and that basically that intuition is almost like a vehicle. It's not the goal, but it's a vehicle to get closer to that which we cannot know.
I appreciate that very much.
I have a quick question about the just the architecture of the text too. This so just starting out with this stima, the call stimin, like the hidden of the hidden. Is that effectively like the Keter level, or what level is that?
Yeah, so I first misspoke and suggested it was just the hidden level, but apparently here in the text, that's beyond the Keter level. So that's Ein Sof. So that's not on the chart. That's like off the chart, or like sailing off the end of the earth if you're Columbus. That's like we're like literally not on the chart. Pre-Keter.
So by the way, I'm Justin Beck in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I found out about this from Andrew posting on Facebook. So thank you for allowing me in.
Thank you.
Andrew. The power of what is Chokhmah, and Bina, obviously it's the understanding, fruition, the development of the power of what. The right column, I've already covered this, I came in late, but the right column being the giving side, and the left column the receiving side. So in the formation of creation, we've got both of these working together, but initially it comes from Chokhmah and then delivered to Bina. And everything else below, the rest of the Sefirot, are an emanation coming out from Bina. And we're situated in Malchut, in the physical world. So really, our connection to Bina, the Malchut Bina connection is primary in terms of our ability to elevate ourselves and to come to fulfillment in our own lives and for all. But this comment on Elohim is usually associated with the left column, the left side, which represents structure and balance, structure and discipline.
So okay. So I think what's going on here is actually a non-standard use of Elohim in the Kabbalah. This is just my feeling. I don't know if Matt has a note about this in his thing, but normally Elohim represents Gvura, strength, right? Is this sort of Midat Hadin, and the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God, represents Chesed or kindness. But here, the use of Elohim, I think, is being used in a different way. My Zoom is frozen, even though I can still speak, so I can't change the screen share. But if I could switch to the Sphirot chart here, Elohim, in technical terms, is being considered a combination of Binah, of me, they're using as the Mem and Yud of Elohim, and Elah actually represent Tiferet and its branches in this use of Elohim. And so Elohim here is, I think, a non-classic use of Elohim, and they're not using it in a doctrinaire way. They're using it in a playful way, but not in the way that it's usually used. And I don't know why they would do that, other than it could be they noticed the letters. I think that's what's going on. It's my feeling about this. Does Matt say anything about that? I can scroll down. So. I don't know.
Well, maybe, I don't know, this might be note 52 says, Bina was not called Elohim until she emanated the 7 lower Sephirot. That sounds like it might be relevant, although I'm not sure.
Yeah, 15, this is not the normal, worth noting and taken, this is not the standard use of Elohim as a specific name per se, I think. I just want to conclude this teaching, if that's okay. Just as me is combined with Elah, so the name Elohim is constantly polysemous. Through this mystery, the universe exists. Then Elijah flew off. I did not see him. From him, I discovered the word, whose mysterious secret I have demonstrated. Rabbi Elazar and all the companions came and bowed down in front of him, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Weeping, they said, if we have come into the world only to hear this, it is enough. Just because this is a really, I think, a profound teaching. It's deeply moving, and the text is just noting that. So I wanted to offer this teaching for us today. I appreciate everyone who's come to sort of summarize. I wish I could switch to the Sfirot. You know, we discussed the interplay based on the verse, lift your eyes on high and see who created these. And so the last time we really discussed Bina as me, Bina as this source of wonder, of understanding at the divine level, but from our level, sort of from a level of awakening from below, looking up, the place where we maintain wonder and curiosity at the knowable in its unknown place, nature of God, right? Our wonder at the mystery of it, just asking the question, who created these things? That psychological place, as it were, is a place of the deepest knowing of God. And I suggested also connection to the universe in the way of the structure behind it, right? If Bina is the structure of not just the physical universe, but the entire manifestation of emanation altogether, in a certain sense, you know, it's like, I think a good metaphor for it is our understanding of scientific concepts about the nature of the world, like physics, in that the more we understand, the more we sort of recognize that we'll never understand everything, right? There's this sort of growing complexity of what we understand, which ultimately leads to more awe and wonder at the sort of mystery. Ordered mystery is maybe the term I'm looking for here. Ordered mystery feels like a good term to me to describe me. So then, as Andy sort of noted at the end here, we worked with the sort of that on a metaphysical level to talk about like the differentiation, I believe was the word you create, or the manifestation that creates. And in the Sfirot, that's talking about Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, that structure of manifesting into being really comes, that the movement of God as an emanator, creator in the world really comes out of Bina, out of this hidden place with wisdom. But the sort of notion that we could easily mistake the parts we recognize and know about and leave behind the parts we don't know about. And I'm suggesting that actually that would be like an ego mistake. A lot of religion could become about being superior to other faith traditions. A lot of life could become about thinking we know better than other people. And actually those things lead to disconnection. They lead to self-isolation. I think this is the psycho-spiritual point being made. That actually, if we want to be connected deeply to the emanation of the universe and to everything else in a balanced way, we need to have both the sort of healthy sense of ego, to have Elah, to have what we can grasp and understand about God, about the universe, about nature, ourselves, but also only always come back to me, to a question of who, or a humble place of a lack of understanding, which is an ability to restrict ourselves and connect with others. So that makes sense? That's, I think, the closing comment I want to offer about this teaching. And I think this has never been a better time. There's never been a better time than now for that. And there's like so much we all understand. And even in our, you can almost chart this in our understanding of the coronavirus. Like everyone has their way about like, well, this is what we need to do to solve it. And everyone's got their sort of like feeling about, everyone is suddenly an epidemiologist. And we all like think we know, or maybe, but then there's this me of like, wanting to trust in some higher authority that knows all that we'll never know as much of, personified by Anthony Fauci or something like that, or Deborah Birx, or these great all-knowing people who are just beyond our understanding. We can know enough about them to comment and judge what they've done, but not enough to ever be them. But of course, those are human idols. Those are still humans. I'm just choosing humans that look godly to us from this moment. So maybe that metaphor is a helpful one. But so it's worth thinking about what are the tangible things we know or think we know, but then how do we come back to cultivate awe, or I like Heschel's radical amazement, and just call that the inner kid in us. You know, we meet me when we're able to cultivate a sense of not thinking too much about this, but just like, wow, this is an incredible world. So I hope people take some time in this chaos to just stare at the sky. The night sky is beautiful. There'll be a sliver of a moon out tonight. It'll be a small moon. So maybe you want to live the verse and contemplate who created these, and know that these doesn't refer to the moon, or does it? I don't know. And with that, I bid everyone a good Wednesday.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Stay healthy and
I want
safe,
to say
everybody.
for our new joiners, I know there are some new joiners, and the Zohar, every time you could leave and say, like, what did we just do? Yeah, that's fine. And the more you do it, it's like, and you see from this teaching, in the end, we're only going to get to questions, like not seeking to explain. But there's a poetic beauty in the way it can craft a structure to our world that is meaningful and engaging, I hope, and engage deep questions. And the text is a beautiful text. But also the more you study the Zohar, just an encouraging note, the more it becomes easier to actually work with its concepts and begin to play with it like you're an right now, many people may be at the level of your first piano lesson, and you're like trying to figure out like what the note is, but then at some point you're going to play the song and be focusing on the dynamic curve, or like how should this be expressed. You'll be debating the finer points of expression and not just struggling to understand like the basic, what are we doing here? So you'll get there. So I want to encourage people to stick with it in case you're feeling like, oh my goodness. And with that, be well.
Okay.